Welcome to ReReview, where we watch movies from our past with a perspective from today. Your hosts are Matt, Bobby, and Austin, and we love the films from our youth, so we're taking a look back to see if they still hold up. On this episode, we're discussing Condorman. Bit of a change. This is first time watch for all of us. This is recommended by some buddies of mine, The Eagle, The Owl, and Spidey. It was released in 1981, directed by Charles Jarrett, stars Michael Crawford, Oliver Reed, and Barbara Carrera. This movie is about real-life comic book characters? Question mark? Now, this is a fair warning. We're spoiling a 42-year-old movie, so if you haven't seen it, we will be revealing key plot points. The marquee opens, and this is a Disney film, and I think we were all surprised by that, just as an opening piece, but maybe simultaneously not, because the opening crawl is the credits, but it's all stock footage of Paris mixed in with an animated Condorman creating chaos through the titles. I was wondering what in the hell we were getting into. What were you thinking when you first saw that come across?
I mean, my first thought that I started thinking about was Pink Panther, like a little bit, like the way that they do openings with the animated stuff, and then a little bit of, I mean, not as much, but it, that, and then a little bit of like Naked Gun-esque type stuff with the way that they were doing the intros. But it was, it made me appreciate modern times and the creditless openings that we generally have now.
It was a very lengthy amount of credits, right? And then through this, I think Bobby, you pointed out that it was stock footage because it kept changing like aspect ratio format, and or I don't know, the film was cut off.
Yeah, I suspect it was either stock footage or some other like cheaper film stock, so they could just basically like shoot a whole bunch of it and then pick and choose like what they wanted for those kind of shots where they weren't really having to worry about like actors doing takes and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. There was a couple things that I think happened through this intro that I definitely want your opinions on. First is the Condorman theme song. Were you moved by it?
I was humming the like 3 or 4 notes or whatever it was, like half, like the whole movie, like in my head. It's like da da da, whatever. How I forget how it even goes now, but I was just like in my head singing it the whole time.
It feels like a 70s TV show theme song kind of mixed in. It felt old, but then again, 42 years is old. So what else can I say to that?
This is fresh and cutting edge, sir.
Yes,
so fresh, so cutting edge. Well, we got that animation on the stock footage, but I think the other thing that seemed, I'm guessing this was a decision because it was Disney, a very distinct Goofy yell.
Yes.
Why was it in there?
This movie was just fraught with stolen sound effects all throughout it, between Goofy and Star Wars and Star Trek, and there was somebody got a hold of the library and just went with it.
You heard some Star Trek stuff. Okay.
Oh, yeah,
I mean, yes,
yeah.
Everything was super familiar and I couldn't pinpoint it all. So that's, I think the thing I want to ask you, because you mentioned this, Matt, this is a Ron Miller film, and I don't know what that means in the scope of things for Disney. Can you give me a little breakdown and help me out? Because it sounds like there's a series of movies that maybe fit into what we just watched.
Well, I mean, Ron Miller being the son-in-law of Disney, he was the CEO for 4 years, from 80 to 84, I think. And that was kind of the era of transition for them, because he's the CEO before Michael Eisner and the whole Disney Renaissance that took place. So he was kind of sandwiched in between old Disney, the way that it used to be, because Disney himself started kind of leaning more towards live action movies during the latter years of his life. And Disney as a brand was very much kind of focused on that. And the animation stuff was there, but you kind of got the feeling that they didn't really care as much about it. And you see a movie like this and you can kind of get a feel for, they were trying to take what was popular, at the time, and kind of piecemeal together things. And you kind of got the feeling, and this whole thing is based off of a book. I don't know how accurate it was to that book. There's a book from the 60s. So it's like 20 years prior, 15 years prior. So that very much was during the, the James Bond era. And you definitely get that. I was kind of halfway expecting it to be a little bit more, comedic, the way that it was kind of going. Like I was expecting some Get Smart level type stuff. But with Ron Miller, like he's kind of like a forgotten CEO in the time period, because you had Disney and then you had like his brother And then like you got to the point where you got to Ron, but then Ron was right before the Renaissance. So everyone remembers the Eisner era. But Ron Miller, for whatever he, might have been, decried for being the CEO, he did kind of set up. I mean, he gave, Tim Burton some of the stuff that, he was kind of leaning into, and he kind of set the stage for Who Framed Roger Rabbit. A bunch of stuff that happened later on that a bunch of other people got credit for. He kind of teed up a little bit. So,
what I was surprised by is that it said Disney Productions, but it seemed like it was in connection with the combination of other production companies. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it said Disney Productions or something, which I wasn't used to. There was no Blue Castle, none of that kind of stuff. It was just the words. And then I don't even think it was the first production company credited.
I mean, to be fair, they were trying to kind of get away from that image. Like I don't think they wanted to put the castle, right? I mean, that's the whole reason why they had like Buena Vista, right?
Right.
Is because they didn't want the Disney stamp on it, but maybe during this era they were still either naive enough to keep that. Because I don't know when Buena Vista really started. Because a lot of stuff I grew up on was Buena Vista.
I was going to say, when did Judge Dredd come out? Wasn't that Buena Vista? They like hit that was Disney.
I thought Buena Vista was like the.
It was a Judge Dredd. What movie am I thinking
Which
of?
one was Disney's wing that was like a little bit more like risque, so to speak?
Buena Vista was able to get away with a lot of that stuff because again, I didn't know, even as a kid, I didn't know Buena Vista was Disney. Now, obviously, if you knew anything about Disney, if you'd ever been to Disney World, you'd probably make connect two and two, to get to that conclusion. But it was like I don't know if they were ashamed of being Disney, but they didn't want people to go, oh, it's a movie by Disney. This is a kid's movie.
Right.
This one, either they still hadn't made that shift yet, or maybe they were doing the reverse and like they were trying to like rebrand themselves. Like, look, we're Disney, and be proud of it. So it is weird now seeing something like this under the Disney banner.
Well, it's one of these things where it, like you mentioned, it not feeling Disney, but you said you thought it would be funnier from a comedy perspective. Is it fair to call this quirky? And I mentioned this specifically because our main character, Woody, is a comic book artist who makes callbacks to Superman being from New York and ultimately is focused on, I think his main thing was his character is Condorman, and Condorman cannot do anything in the comic book that is not actually feasible in real life. That seems like a very restrictive way to write a comic.
Not only that, but almost kind of dangerous, because I think he specifically calls out that kids will know that this is possible. And I'm like, I don't know if that's a good idea, man. That could end up in some lawsuits, I think. I mean, I guess you could credit him for some integrity, but it, like you said, it's very restrictive to be a comic book writer, and you can't be too fantastical. But at the same time, he also had boats with lasers on them. So, this is alternate 1980s, I guess.
The laser stuff. Well, again, borrowed sounds that we can get into. I just came across, like, the character of Woody came across to me as being just delusional, right? Just sort of this wacky, crazy guy, right? That just doesn't really like line up with what's happening in life. He goes to France to meet his buddy Harry, who Harry's in the CIA, right? But they're good friends, and he's like, let me help you out with your comic stuff by taking photos of you jumping off the Eiffel Tower. At this point, I think we were all shocked that it looked like they actually filmed at the Eiffel Tower. We're kind of going, wait, did they really do this?
It sure looks like they did. I mean, I gotta give this movie some credit that they did a lot of physical stunts, like crashing cars and boats and skiing stuff and all sorts of wild stuff. It really looked like this was like a pretty like James Bond style stunt spectacular type movie.
Well, was that one of the things where our initial reaction is that it felt cheap, and then by the end, I think everyone was going, wait, they spent a lot of money on blowing a lot of stuff up.
Yeah, I think I saw it was like it had a budget of like 15 million, which is a lot of money, but by movie standards, because nowadays are usually $200 million. I'm sure inflation, somebody could probably break out an inflation calculator. That's probably like 85 million now or something, which would be a pretty modest budget. Before, I mean, they're building custom cars and jets and a bunch of stuff. They're blowing up. I'm pretty sure those Porsches were like, just kits or whatever, but
Sure.
That's still a lot of money that they threw into it. Location shoots, they actually filmed on all these locations that they went to.
Yeah. How do we feel about the world traveling nature of Woody and Condorman?
My initial thought, they were probably filming other stuff at the same time. And so they tagged along. That was the first thing I thought. I was like, there's no way they approved the budget for this movie for travel alone.
Oh, poor Woody and Condorman. It's a weird thing because he was obviously we only get that hint that he's obsessed with the idea of being a spy. And so when he actually gets signed up to be the liaison or civilian representation to make a trade, we get the scene in Istanbul where he legit turns into like Fighter Man. I don't know that I was expecting it. I thought he was on strings at one point because it seemed very puppety in the terms of the way they did the fight choreography.
I was thinking the tuxedo during that scene. Like, is that jacket mechanized or?
It totally felt that way, right? But at this point, did you want to believe that maybe Woody could be the real deal?
He was the one.
Not quite for me, not yet at that point. I mean, that scene was a lot of like slapstick, like oops, kind of stuff. And then it continued like that for a while, but then, with the cane, which we might talk about later, and various other things, but I feel like it kind of had less of that as it went on. And so I guess true to form, maybe he was learning his way as he went along, kind of like failing upward, so to speak.
I like that this is his character arc, learning his ways. He can be the true and ultimate eventually. Condorman. I want to try an Istanbul triple. I want to see what that cocktail is since it was on fire for days. And I think that was the thing with a lot of the gags, right? Things went long, right? The scope of like a joke or a gag, you mentioned the slapstick, it feels like everything was stretched out.
I didn't like the slapstick fighting, but I thought that Istanbul triple part was really funny. And the fact that they just kept going with it, like he tried to blow it out.
Yes. It was surprisingly long. Now at this point, we meet I'll say quote unquote love interest, Natalia, who is the other international spy, where he decides to reveal that he is codenamed Condorman because he really wants to be a spy. This movie builds up that they have to be the romantic interest together, but I think, Bobby, you called her one thing specifically because you felt that she didn't necessarily have autonomy, right?
Yeah, she really played the damsel in distress role to me. Where it really was obvious to me was at the end, we're jumping around here, but in the boat scene, wasn't she called Laser Girl in the comic books or something like that? Laser Lady. And they're shooting lasers and she's not the one doing it. Like, come on, man. Like, she's got to be shooting the lasers. Like, I really wish that, and I mean, maybe it's just like a sign of the times that this movie was made in, but I really wish they would have given her more to do. Like, like Princess Leia kind of helped shoot her way out of the prison and the Death Star. Like, take a page from that and have her shoot her way out on the boats. I just kind of think I would have appreciated her taking a little bit more of an active role in her escape.
Well, there's a couple more things about Sign of the Times that we could get into, but we'll get there.
Yikes.
I think, I know there's some yikes coming. You mentioned the cane because it does get to that bit as well, where ultimately there's the exchange of information. They find out Condorman is this guy. The Russian agents are like, we got to get to this person. Who are they? They try to set something up, and it turns out Natalia wants to defect and move to the US, yada, yada, yada. But to help her escape, we get to another bit where we talked about this a little bit, Matt, where we're being moved into these new set pieces or scenes, and I was questioning whether or not we were seeing a dream state, like he was making something up, because it shifted so much that I didn't even necessarily realize that, oh, this is actually happening in the movie. This isn't just him making the plan in his head.
I mean, that's how I felt during the Istanbul bar fight scene. Like, it just felt out of place. Like, all of a sudden things were happening that didn't seem like they belonged with what had happened prior. And yeah, it's where like maybe a more modern take on something like this would have been a bit more clever with how these things happened. It either would have been like a True Lies situation where he just accidentally accomplished things. Or it would have been like, it did, like he had been hypnotized and that, coat actually did make him believe he was a spy or something. But the way that it kind of happened, yeah, it was kind of hard to tell because it got a little bit wacky at times, like between the bar, the bar fight and then the gypsy escape.
Yeah, so this is the key with the cane,
yes.
Right? So we have him claiming as Condorman that he doesn't use weapons. And then the next thing, he unleashes all of Kane hell onto these two guys, which I'm convinced he unalived one of them because there was no action after. That played just like you described. You said the Uzi scene from True Lies, kind of like, oh, whoops. I guess I didn't know how to use this, except at some point he is just wielding it like a madman. Like, look at my cane go.
That cane had like 800 bullets in it. And he used like every single one of them.
It just went on a little bit longer than it probably should have.
Yes.
I think literally, didn't they do that joke where like, it's like, like it like did a little burst at the end?
Yes.
That was kind of what made it funny for me, because at first I was like, oh, here we go with the like slapstick comedy again. Like that kind of stuff doesn't work for me. But then like as it kept going and kept going and kept going, I was like, okay, I'm kind of here with the ridiculousness, because like clearly they're just laying into it entirely.
This is where, you get that. It's that Family Guy where they cross the line where you're like, this joke. Oh, wait a second. They're still going. And it felt like that quite a bit of the time. How do we feel about our main antagonist, Krokov?
A Bond villain, he is not. But at the same time, like he did have some presence to him. But I feel like for as bad as Natalia made him seem, like, I mean, to be honest, all of the one, because we had him. We also had Glass Eye Dude, or Robotic Eye. I don't know what the deal with his eye was, but he had some
like
sort of special
like a ball bearing or something.
Yeah, it was like chrome and it did stuff. But like, I don't know, the way she made it sound was very like intimidating, scary or whatever. And I think that after they kidnapped her or whatever, and they were inside the chateau and they're talking, I was like, oh, this guy's kind of reasonable. Like he's like, I'm over here waiting for like Javier Bardem to come in and start, like intimidating the crap out of her. And he's like, okay, just hold up your thing. He does say like, I will unalive you, but he does it like, it wasn't even really that threatening. It was just like, all right, I'm going to do it if I have to do it. I didn't want to do it, but
he's like, I prefer not to.
Yeah.
In fact, I kind of want to keep you alive. So I'm going to make up a lie and unalive someone else.
Yeah.
He was actually caring for her and she still wanted out. Talk about money being spent. I made a note, like, what was the Porsche budget? You mentioned their kits. I saw those cars roll up and don't hate me for this, but I was happy with how insanely long the car chase scene was. Why was it like 10 hours?
Well, no, okay. I mean, I liked it too, actually.
To be fair, they brought in the coordinator who did the Italian job.
Oh,
and he was very meticulous. He was like, we are taking this seriously. We are going to, like, he was a perfectionist on all of it. And they
feel better now.
Put the effort into it. So he was in charge of the car chases, the boat chases, the like all of that was all him to coordinate. And it kind of shows on screen, to be honest.
The car chase just got me again with the Porsches moving around, everything they were doing, the conversion of the hoopty into the supercar. We get our first introduction into the lasers with the coordinated Porsche driving to miss said lasers. And then I think I was, we are so used to things being CG that I was utterly shocked that they just threw these cars off the side of a cliff and blew them up.
Right. Like they're like on fire going into like some forest of all these green trees. It's like, what kind of Is this one of these crazy movies where they're just like, oh, let's just go somewhere and film it real quick and no one will notice anything, or is it,
Mm-hmm.
are they really like doing things they have to do? And if you're going to have like 5 or 6 Porsches in the movie, how many did they actually have?
I feel like that was it. It was those 5.
That was it. That was it. They're like, if one breaks, we'll just like figure it out.
Because I think I appreciated at one point when the main car, is that Morovich, that car, he like goes down the hill at insane steam and then the bumper pops off. And I was convinced we were going to have a continuity issue that the bumper would be back on, and it wasn't there. And I said, holy, wait, they like actually let the car get damaged and keep that damage throughout the chase.
That tells me one of two things. Either they filmed the movie chronologically and they're basically just like, it broke off, like, let's not waste the time trying to put it back on. Or like they just are just like, yeah, we'll just go with it now.
Mm-hmm. I feel like a lot of it was, we'll just go with it now at some point, right? This is probably the Bond influence. Very tech heavy, right? Except that Condorman was also Moneypenny. Do I have the right names? No. Is that the right name?
Q. You're thinking
Q. Thank you. I'm thinking Q. Is that really, that was the whole goal here? He's like, I'm going to come up with comic book stuff. We never really see him go through the process. We just have to assume he is like some tech genius and the government can build it for him, right?
Yeah, I wanted the process.
Bobby wanted the 3-hour cut of this.
I knew you were going to say that. I didn't want the movie to be longer. I wanted it to be... I'm a logistics guy, I've said many times on this podcast that like I want to see like how things happen and why. I need to know why in my slapstick comedy spy like world gallivanting movies. Like, did he fly? Did he fly coach, or did he have first class, or what happened here?
Let's see if we missed anything. The cane gun, was that really the first one from a tech perspective? No, I'm not counting our first introduction to the suit. But we get the cane gun, then we do get the car that shoots lasers, that comes out of the hoopty, that eventually turns into a hovercraft.
I think just
they said hovercraft, but it looked to me like it was just like a
car boat,
like a raft car.
Then are we in the snow next? So we get the jet fueled basically lift.
Yeah, I was confused by that. Where was the jet part of it? I mean, like, I understand that it like was like a ski lift, but what
there's a part of me that wonders if they filmed that scene backwards. Like they had them pointing in the opposite direction, had them go down the zip line, and then just reverse the footage.
Wow, you know what? That's pretty smart. I bet that might be it.
I feel like I should ask because we know there's a lot of wire work going on, and we see it initially when he jumps off the Eiffel Tower, and we know physically a man could not flap wings and stay in the air. But with that said, anytime there was air stuff involved, there was such a slowness to it, and the rocket lift in particular, he presents it as like, we're gonna launch up the thing. It takes off, and they're just like crawling up at like people mover pace.
Was that like a safety thing? Because they were actually doing this, probably. I mean, they clearly had a stunt. Like at one point, they had the woman, and I'm pretty sure like the stunt guy was like a dude. It looked like, but I mean, I wonder if it was like a safety situation.
Matt, I heard you laugh at this. The snow angels.
Oh yeah.
when they cut back to the snow angels,
they fall and they have like perfect outlines of them. It was very cartoonish.
Just the dummy that falls first, like you couldn't, like, it was very obvious it was a dummy, and then just laying there in the snow with that.
How come they didn't have the repeat of the Goofy scream right there too?
They probably should have.
I wanted to see that.
Here's, I think, the hardest hitting question I've probably ever asked on this podcast. Bobby, do you think Robert Downey Jr. used this movie as an inspiration for Tropic Thunder?
Oh no!
For Tropic Thunder. Okay, I was like, wow, the Iron Man. Okay, yeah, he was definitely like. It was definitely an Iron Man. He was like, okay, like
He made all those cars in a cave with a box of scraps.
Oh, I needed that for myself. I'm dying over here. We talked about Of the Time, right? And I think when we Short Circuit, same idea. The brown face. The world was different back then.
I mean, it wasn't only the brown face too. It was like his attempt at the accents with the Italian and some of the other ones. It was like, oh man, that's kind of cringy.
There was quite a bit of it.
There was. I feel like it probably is far less than what I would have seen in a Naked Gun movie potentially. And
Good point.
I honestly thought it was going to go even worse than it did. It sounds bad,
Yeah.
but I was expecting way worse than what we
Right.
ended up getting. Especially like when you start you start seeing the scene play out and like, oh no, that
Mhm.
like and I mean, to be fair, like this is still technically the 80s or whatever, so it's like threshold, right? Like we're far beyond the John Wayne Genghis Khan
Mhm.
like thing where like they're trying to sell you that they're actually it, but it's still not, to the modern times where you have, Robert Downey Jr. I feel like in Tropic Thunder was meta enough to kind of get away with it.
Yeah.
And I know there's always going to
Right.
be people it's like, you couldn't do that movie now, but I like, if you did it the right way, then I think you still could. But I think that also negates the point that that kind of comedy probably couldn't be made now. Like that
Mhm.
was of its time, just
Mhm.
like the college humor movies of American Pie were very much the early 2000s. This, I've definitely seen worse in the 80s with, what was it, like Mickey Rooney and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So this wasn't as bad as it probably could have been, but it was still like, oh, we're doing this. Okay. All right. Let's just hope this doesn't get too bad. I was bracing the entire time.
I can understand why. It's 42 years is a long time. Speedboats happen. We get to the end. He takes her away from Krokov. I did want to mention in the speedboats just because I said it as we were watching it. They sure let that smoke fly. You said it was meticulous. Man, every camera shot as things were exploding, I was like, wow, it is just really dark and you can't really see as much going on because they're just letting everything blow up. I appreciated all of it in terms of, again, practical effects and letting it fly. They make it to good old Los Angeles. Isn't that the safest haven for your defecting spy? We get a blimp.
That would have been the comedy more too. Comedy aspect.
Well, we get a blimp. The people in the blimp are the CIA, and they say they love Condorman, and they want to hire him for something else. What do you think Harry told him was going to be his next assignment? Bobby, you first.
Well, I would steal what Matt
Oh,
said while we were watching it. That's the only thing I can think of.
You thief. You thief.
So I'm gonna give it to Matt because anything else I try to guess is not gonna be as good right now.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that really made any sense to me to get that kind of reaction was it had to be space. Like you have to take it to the final frontier, right? Like Condor Man in a spaceship that he designed, the flaming eagle on it. Just take the Enterprise, red, flaming eagle, gold, have him go warp speed. He developed that too. He sketched it or something. It was in a comic book he did one time. Laser ladies manning the weapons, This is Bobby's version. She's being useful in this one.
Make Laser Lady do more lasers.
Okay, this will be my last question before we get to the real one. Is this worth it enough? Is this IP? Is Condorman worth redoing today?
Oh,
The CW TV show.
Oh,
yes, there it is. That is the right answer.
Featuring the cast of
CW TV show.
Riverdale.
Oh, it hurts. Bobby, are you recommending Condorman?
Man, I really thought that all the stunt work was. I mean, you don't really see very much of the stuff. There's James Bond movies, but I mean, even then, it's like the James Bond movies, especially the older ones, tend to feel staged, and this one has like a little bit more of like a independent, chaotic feel to it that I think is neat. So, I mean, I like from a filmmaking aspect of it, I was pretty fascinated. Like, like 90% of the movie seems to be like a wide medium shot, like, and I'm like, okay, like I'm seeing all the surroundings, I'm seeing what's going on here. Like, like, so it's basically like, film school in a box. I'd love to like see if they have like the Lord of the Rings, like style
Wow.
behind the scenes
I
documentaries.
was not ready for that. He wants the like 10-hour breakdown.
Yeah, where's like the cinematographer talking about every shot in detail?
Ron Miller says thank you to you, Bobby. Matt, do you recommend Condorman?
I was pleasantly surprised watching this, to be honest. I didn't have very high hopes, and it's not like this isn't winning an Oscar or anything like that in my book, but it definitely was something that I found entertaining. It slowed down a bit in the middle, unfortunately. And I could have done with a little bit more of the slapstick, I think, to Bobby's chagrin there, but
wow.
I think that they could have leaned a little bit more into it. I definitely say if you like movies like Superman 3 or Howard the Duck, you'll love this movie. If you don't, drink beforehand, have friends, and you'll probably have an entertaining night.
It's interesting hearing both the takes, Bobby being very technical because he doesn't want to say I wouldn't watch this otherwise. And Matt, your comparisons are, I think, spot on. There's
for sure
this feels like
a
weird window of you're gonna be like the right person to watch this if you like those other types of films, and outside of that, I don't know how you necessarily buy into what this is. So I'm definitely kind of in the camp of you should watch it if you like weird, campy, offbeat, never gonna make a sequel. It was 1981. Go back to the past and have a beer, type of thing. It's just it is a movie that was made, and for that we give it credit.
I mean, there aren't very many of the James Bond, like the James Bond was like it, right? Like there aren't very many like there's parodies, but there aren't like parallel spy movies of that nature, right? So this is like a rare bird, pun intended.
All right, you're cut off. You were so cut off. I love that at the end of the day, this is probably truly a parody and you're just not labeling it as that. So nicely done, Bobby. As always, thank you for listening. And remember, I'll bring the dip if you bring the Dostoevsky.